The morning sun cast long shadows across the checkpoint as Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams approached the military barricade on foot. He'd been driving back from a classified briefing at Fort Bragg when his unmarked civilian vehicle had broken down 3 miles back. Now, wearing plain clothes and carrying only his military ID, he walked toward what should have been a routine encounter with fellow service members, but the 4 National Guard soldiers manning the checkpoint saw something else entirely. "Hold it right there," Corporal Jensen barked, his M4 carbine rising to a ready position. "Turn around slowly, hands where I can see them." Marcus complied immediately, his trained instincts taking over. Years of Delta Force operations had taught him to read situations quickly, and this one was escalating fast. The young guardsmen were nervous, their fingers hovering too close to triggers, their stance betraying inexperience and prejudice. "I'm active duty military," Marcus called out calmly, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Williams, Delta Force. My ID is in my back pocket." "Yeah, right," sneered Private Morrison, a kid who looked barely old enough to vote. "And I'm the Secretary of Defense." "You hear that accent? Probably doesn't even speak English properly." Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. Despite 15 years of distinguished service, despite leading operations that had saved American lives across 3 continents, despite the silver star and purple heart in his dress uniform back home, he was still just another suspicious black man to these soldiers. "Sir, I need you to get on your knees," Jensen commanded, emboldened by his partner's racist bravado. "Hands behind your head." "Soldier, I'm ordering you to stand down," Marcus replied, his voice taking on the steel that had commanded respect in the most dangerous corners of the world. "I am a superior officer, and I'm instructing you to verify my identity through proper channels." But the guardsmen weren't listening. Fear and prejudice had clouded their judgment. Morrison moved to flank Marcus while Jensen kept his weapon trained on him. The 3rd soldier, Specialist Rodriguez, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The 4th, Sergeant Thompson, was reaching for his radio but hadn't yet made the call. "This is your last warning," Jensen shouted. "On your knees, now." Marcus assessed his options in milliseconds. He could disarm all 4 soldiers before they knew what hit them. His Delta Force training made it almost laughably easy. But that would only escalate the situation and potentially end careers, including his own. Instead, he made a calculated decision. "Sergeant Thompson," Marcus called out, noting the senior man's rank. "I'm going to slowly reach for my ID. I'm asking you, as one professional soldier to another, to verify my identity before this situation goes too far." Thompson finally spoke up. "Jensen, hold your fire. Let's see what he's got." With deliberate, careful movements, Marcus retrieved his military ID and tossed it gently toward Thompson. The sergeant picked it up, glanced at it, and his face went pale. "Oh, Jesus," Thompson whispered. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Williams, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta." He looked up at Marcus with a mixture of recognition and horror. "Sir, we didn't, what's it say?" Jensen demanded, still keeping his weapon raised. "It says we just held a Delta Force commander at gunpoint because you idiots couldn't see past the color of his skin," Thompson snapped. "Lower your weapons. Now." The transformation was immediate. Jensen's rifle dropped as if it had caught fire. Morrison stepped back, suddenly finding the ground very interesting. Rodriguez finally spoke up, "Sir, we sincerely apologize. This was a misunderstanding." Marcus picked up his ID and studied each soldier carefully. He'd faced enemy fire in Afghanistan, led raids against terrorist cells in Iraq, and survived situations that would break ordinary men. But standing here, being judged by his own countrymen based solely on his appearance, cut deeper than any wound he'd received in combat. "A misunderstanding?" Marcus repeated quietly. "Soldier, I want you to think about what just happened here. I'm a decorated officer who has spent his entire adult life serving this country. I've bled for the flag you wear on your uniform. And yet, your first instinct was to see me as a threat." He gestured to the checkpoint around them. "This position exists to protect American citizens." "But who were you protecting them from? A man walking down a public road? A fellow soldier trying to get back to base?" Thompson stepped forward. "Sir, there's no excuse for what happened here. We'll file a full report and—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "You won't file a report to cover your asses. You'll file a report because it's the right thing to do. Because every soldier who serves under you deserves better than to be judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character." He looked at each young soldier in turn. "I've commanded men and women of every race, religion, and background. What made them good soldiers wasn't what they looked like, it was their courage, their dedication, and their willingness to put others before themselves. Those are the qualities that matter in uniform." Jensen finally found his voice. "Sir, what can we do to make this right?" Marcus considered the question. He could destroy these young soldiers' careers with a single phone call. He could have them court-martialed, discharged, their futures ruined. But that wouldn't solve the deeper problem. "You want to make it right?" Marcus asked. "Then learn from this. Every time you see someone and make assumptions based on their appearance, remember this moment. Remember that you almost made the biggest mistake of your military careers because you couldn't see past your own prejudices." He pointed down the road toward the base. "I'm going to walk to that base, and I'm going to report to my commanding officer. What happens next depends on what kind of soldiers you choose to be going forward." As Marcus turned to leave, Thompson called out, "Sir?" "Thank you." Marcus paused. "For what, Sergeant?" "For not destroying us when you had every right to." Marcus looked back at the 4 soldiers, young men who would carry this moment with them for the rest of their lives. "The military I serve in is supposed to be better than this. We're supposed to judge people by their actions, not their appearance. If you remember that, then maybe something good can come from today." He continued walking toward the base, his mind already shifting to the conversation he would need to have with his superior officer. The encounter would be reported, properly and fully. There would be consequences, training, discussions, possibly disciplinary action, but more importantly, there would be a teachable moment. For young soldiers had just learned a lesson that no classroom could provide. They had faced their own prejudices and been forced to confront the ugliness of assumptions based on race. As Marcus reached the main gate of the base, the guards there snapped to attention, recognizing his bearing if not his civilian clothes. "Good morning, Colonel Williams," the gate guard said respectfully. "Good morning, Corporal," Marcus replied, returning the professional courtesy. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it reminded him why he served. The military, at its best, was a meritocracy where respect was earned through service and sacrifice, not granted based on appearance. There was still work to be done. Today's encounter proved that, but progress was possible. Behind him, at the checkpoint, 4 National Guard soldiers were having the most important conversation of their military careers. And somewhere down the line, when they encountered other civilians, other soldiers, other human beings who didn't look like them, they would remember the day they almost made a terrible mistake. They would remember the Delta Force commander who chose to teach rather than punish, who chose to educate rather than retaliate, and maybe, just maybe, they would choose to be better soldiers because of it. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows that had fallen across the checkpoint. But the lesson learned there would cast a longer shadow, one that might help prevent the next Marcus Williams from facing the same assumptions, the same prejudice, the same moment when skin color mattered more than service. In the end, that was what Marcus Williams fought for, not just the freedom of strangers in foreign lands, but the promise that America could be better than its worst moments, that the uniform they all wore could mean something more than the prejudices they brought to it. The Delta Force commander walked onto his base, ready to serve another day, carrying with him the hope that today's lesson would ripple outward, making the military, and the country, a little more worthy of the sacrifices made in its name.